The night sky above the Arizona desert was quiet, wide, and empty, until it suddenly tore open with light. A streak of blue fire cut across the darkness, fast and silent at first, then roaring like a wounded animal. Ethan Cole was standing outside his small repair garage when he saw it. He thought it was a meteor, maybe space junk burning in the atmosphere. But this was different. The light did not fade. It grew brighter, closer, larger. The ground began to shake under his boots, and a deep sound rolled across the desert like distant thunder. Then the sky exploded in white. The object crashed beyond the old canyon ridge, sending up a cloud of dust and sand that rose like a storm. Windows in Ethan's garage rattled hard. Tools fell from the wall. His heart pounded in his chest for a long second. Everything went silent again. No sirens, no planes, just the whisper of desert wind. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the place where the light had fallen. He should have stayed inside. He knew that, but something pulled him forward, maybe curiosity, maybe something else he cannot explain. He grabbed his flashlight and drove his old truck toward the ridge. The tires kicked up sand as he moved closer. A strange blue glow painted the rocks ahead. It was not fire. It did not flicker like normal flames. It moved slowly, almost like it was alive. When he reached the crash site, he stopped breathing for a moment. A ship lay broken between the rocks. It was not metal like any plane he had ever seen. It looked smooth silver, curved like liquid frozen in motion. Pieces of it were scattered across the sand. Some parts were still glowing with soft blue light. The air smelled sharp and clean, like lightning after a storm. Ethan stepped closer. His boots crunched on broken glass that was not really glass. The ship had a large crack on one side. And inside, something moved. He raised his flashlight with shaking hands. The beam fell on a figure trapped beneath a piece of curved metal. It was a girl. She looked human at first, maybe in her early 20s. Her skin was pale, but almost shining under the blue light. She wore silver armor that seemed too thin to protect anyone. Strange symbols floated around her body, small glowing shapes that moved slowly in the air like drifting snow. Her long white hair was spread across the sand, untouched by dirt or blood. For a second, Ethan thought she was dead. Then her fingers moved just slightly. He rushed forward and pushed the metal piece away with effort. It was lighter than it looked, almost weightless. The symbols around her brightened as he touched her arm, and a soft humming sound filled the air. Her eyes opened slowly. They were not normal eyes. They were deep violet, glowing faintly, and filled with confusion. She tried to speak, but the words were strange, sharp, and musical. Ethan did not understand anything. He swallowed and held up his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe." She stared at him like she was trying to study his face, his simple clothes, his dusty boots, his tired eyes. Her lips trembled. She looked weak, like she had no strength left. Ethan quickly ran back to his truck and grabbed a bottle of water. He returned and carefully lifted her head, helping her drink. The moment the water touched her lips, the floating symbols flashed bright blue. The humming sound grew louder, and the air felt charged, like before lightning strikes. She suddenly grabbed his wrist. Her grip was stronger than it should have been. The glowing symbols rushed toward his hand, burning into his skin without pain, forming a small shining mark on his palm. Ethan gasped and tried to pull back, but he could not move. Her violet eyes locked onto his, clear now, focused. Then she spoke again, this time in perfect English. "I belong to you now," she whispered. The words were soft, but they felt heavy, like they carried meaning far beyond what he understood. Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice shaking. Before she could answer, a loud rumble echoed across the desert. Bright lights appeared in the sky above them. Not stars, not planes. Multiple shapes moved fast, silent and controlled. Helicopters approached from the south, their blades cutting the air, government lights flashing red and white. At the same time, the broken ship began to glow brighter. The symbols around her body spun faster. The mark on Ethan's palm burned gently now, warm like sunlight. The girl looked past him toward the sky, and for the first time, fear showed on her face. "They found me," she whispered. The desert was no longer quiet. It was alive with danger. Ethan had only offered water to a stranger, but in doing so, he had changed something ancient and powerful, something written in laws older than Earth itself. And far above them, hidden beyond the clouds, something much larger watched the glowing mark on his hand awaken. If you enjoy stories like this and want to see what happens next, gently consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the journey ahead. The helicopters circled above the desert like hungry birds, their lights cutting through dust and smoke. Ethan's heart pounded as he looked from the sky back to the strange girl in his arms. The blue glow around her began to fade, but the mark on his palm stayed bright. Steady like a small star pressed into his skin, he could still feel warmth inside it, not painful, but alive. The girl tried to stand, but her legs trembled. Ethan caught her before she fell. She looked smaller now, weaker, but her violet eyes were sharp and aware. She stared at the glowing mark on his hand, then at his confused face. "The bond is complete," she said quietly. "What bond?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely steady. She touched his hand gently, and the floating symbols returned, circling both of them like soft light in water. "You gave life to a dying royal," she explained, her English calm but heavy with meaning. "By the first law of the Celestine throne, the one who saves a royal heir becomes their guardian." "I don't want to guard anyone," Ethan replied quickly, glancing at the helicopters that were getting closer. "I'm just a mechanic." Her expression did not change, but something softer appeared in her eyes. "It is not choice," she said. "It is law written in blood and stars. It cannot be undone." A loud crack split the air as one of the helicopters fired a warning flare toward the crash site. Ethan pulled her down behind a rock as dust exploded around them. Soldiers were landing beyond the ridge, shouting orders, unaware that something far greater than a crashed object waited in the shadows. Suddenly, the sky above shifted again, not from Earth, from space. 3 dark shapes appeared high above the clouds, too still to be planes, too sharp to be satellites. They moved with quiet precision, descending without sound. The girl's face grew pale. "They are not your people," she said. The air around them vibrated, and small beams of white light shot down from the sky, scanning the desert floor. One beam passed over Ethan and the girl, and the glowing mark on his palm flared bright blue. The beam stopped, locked onto him. For a long second, nothing happened. Then something impossible occurred. One of the dark shapes in the sky shifted position and lowered slightly, and from its underside, a single narrow light descended like a thin column. It touched the sand just meters away from Ethan, and within it a figure appeared. The figure was tall, covered in smooth black armor, face hidden behind a silver mask. The soldier from the sky stepped forward slowly, scanning the area with a glowing device in its hand. Ethan felt frozen. Unable to move, the girl gently squeezed his wrist. "Do not show fear," she whispered. The armored being stopped when it saw the glowing mark on Ethan's palm. It lowered its weapon instantly. Then, in one smooth motion, it dropped to one knee. Ethan blinked in disbelief. The being bowed its head toward him. "Guardian acknowledged." A deep mechanical voice echoed from inside the mask. Ethan looked at the girl, confused and stunned. "Why is it bowing to me?" he asked. "Because now," she answered softly, "you outrank it." Before Ethan could respond, another beam of light struck the ground farther away. And this time, 3 more armored figures appeared. But these did not kneel. Their armor was darker, sharper, lined with red light instead of blue. Their weapons were already raised. The girl's breath caught. "Assassins," she whispered. A blast of red energy shot across the desert, striking the sand near them and sending heat across Ethan's face. The kneeling soldier moved instantly, rising and blocking another shot with a glowing shield. The desert erupted in a silent chaos, blue beams and red blasts crossing in flashes of light. Ethan grabbed the girl's arm and pulled her behind the remains of the ship. His mind struggled to understand what was happening. Just hours ago, he had been fixing an old engine. Now alien soldiers were fighting in the sky because he had offered someone water. "You said the bond cannot be undone," he said breathlessly. "What does that mean for me?" She looked at him fully now, No fear in her eyes, only truth. It means if I die, you die. The words hit him harder than the explosions around them. And if you die, she continued quietly, the Empire will burn this world to ashes in response. Another blast shook the canyon. One of the red-armored assassins advanced toward them, moving faster than any human could run, its weapon glowing brighter with each step. The blue-armored soldier was struck and thrown into the rocks, its shield flickering. The assassin stopped only meters away from Ethan, its mask tilted slightly, studying him. You are unworthy, it said in a cold voice. A primitive species cannot hold royal claim. The girl stepped forward, standing between Ethan and the assassin despite her weakness. The bond is sealed, she declared, her voice stronger now, echoing with unseen power. By ancient right, he is guardian. The assassin raised its weapon, red light charging at the tip. Ethan felt something surge through the mark on his palm. Not pain, not fear, something steady and warm. The symbol glowed brighter, spreading faint lines of blue light up his wrist. His body felt lighter, stronger, sharper. The assassin fired. But Ethan moved without thinking. He stepped forward and grabbed the alien weapon mid-blast. The red energy dissolved against his glowing hand like mist in sunlight. The assassin froze in shock. For a moment, even the desert wind seemed to stop. The girl stared at him, eyes wide. You see now, she whispered softly, the bond does not only protect me. Far above them, beyond the clouds, a massive warship shifted position, its surface glowing faintly as it locked onto Earth's orbit. And in the silent halls of that ship, a single voice spoke calmly. The human has activated. The invasion of Earth had just become something much more complicated. High above Earth, beyond the thin blue layer of its sky, the Imperial warship drifted in silence. It was vast and dark, shaped like a curved blade pointed toward the planet below. Lights moved across its surface in careful patterns, scanning, measuring, calculating. Inside its command chamber, tall figures in silver robes stood around a floating star map. At the center of the map, one small blue symbol pulsed brighter than the rest, marking Earth. The bond has been confirmed, one of the commanders said, his voice calm but tight. The princess lives, and the guardian is human. A colder voice answered from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. Then the rumors were true. The speaker stepped forward into the dim light. His armor was black with thin lines of red glowing along the edges. His face was sharp, older, marked by ambition rather than age. He was Lord Vaylor, brother to the late emperor and uncle to Princess Illyra, the one who now hunted her. A primitive world, Vaylor continued, studying the image of Earth, a backward species who still fight with metal and fire, and yet the bond chose one of them. It was not choice. Another commander corrected carefully. The princess was dying, the first law activated. Vaylor's lips curved into a thin smile. Then the law is flawed, he said softly, and flaws must be corrected. Below, in the desert, the red-armored assassin lay still in the sand, its weapon shattered in two pieces. Ethan stared at his glowing hand in disbelief. He could still feel the energy inside him, steady and strong, like a second heartbeat. Illyra stood beside him, breathing slowly, watching the sky with worry that did not fade. They will not stop, she said quietly. My uncle does not forgive failure. Ethan looked at her, dust and light mixing around them. Your uncle wants you dead, he asked, still trying to understand the scale of what he had stepped into. She nodded once. He wants the throne. In space, Vaylor turned away from the star map. His decision was already made. Prepare the fleet, he ordered, but do not destroy the planet yet. The commanders hesitated. My lord, if we wait, the Guardian may grow stronger. Vaylor's eyes narrowed. Then we test him. Back on Earth, military vehicles surrounded the crash site from a distance. Human soldiers took cover behind armored trucks, pointing weapons at shapes they could barely see. The blue-armored Imperial soldier stood protectively near Ethan and Illyra, its shield flickering but stable again. They do not understand, Illyra murmured, watching the human troops. They think this is invasion. Isn't it? Ethan replied quietly. Before she could answer, the sky darkened unnaturally. Clouds formed where none had been before, spinning slowly above the canyon. The temperature dropped sharply, and every electronic device within miles began to fail. Radios turned silent. Vehicle engines stalled. Ethan looked up just as a massive shape pushed through the cloud cover. The Imperial warship descended just enough to be seen, blocking stars with its shadow. It did not fire. It did not move aggressively. It simply hovered, powerful and silent, like a predator watching prey. A beam of white light shot down from the ship and formed a glowing platform in the air above the desert floor. From that platform stepped a tall figure in royal armor, silver and red, carrying no visible weapon. His presence alone felt heavier than gravity. Alyra froze. Her voice became barely a whisper. Vaylor. Ethan felt the mark on his palm pulse hard. Responding to the newcomer's energy, the blue-armored soldier lowered its head slightly, showing recognition. Vaylor descended slowly until he stood on the sand. Only 20 steps away from Ethan and Alyra, he studied Ethan first, not with anger, but with cold interest. "So this is the Guardian," Vaylor said calmly, his voice smooth and controlled. "A mechanic from dust and stone." Ethan clenched his glowing hand, refusing to step back. "You sent people to kill her," he said simply. Vaylor's expression did not change. "I sent loyal servants to protect the Empire from weakness," he corrected. "The princess chose to flee instead of accept her fate." "I did not flee," Alyra replied firmly, stepping beside Ethan. "I survived your betrayal." Vaylor's eyes flicked toward her, something darker moving behind them. "You misunderstand, niece," he said softly. "I do this for stability. The Empire cannot be ruled by sentiment." The air between them felt charged, tense, and ready to break. Vaylor's gaze returned to Ethan. "The bond between you and her is an error," he continued. "Your species has no place in royal law." Ethan did not fully understand ancient laws or galactic politics, but he understood one thing clearly. She asked for water. He said, "I gave it." Vaylor studied him for a long moment. Then a faint smile appeared. "Yes," he said quietly, "and that simple act has complicated everything." Suddenly the ground shook, not from weapons, not from engines, but from something deeper. The mark on Ethan's palm flared bright blue again, spreading thin lines of light up his arm, matching faint glowing patterns that appeared briefly on Alyra's skin. Vaylor noticed, and for the first time, surprise flickered in his eyes. "The resonance," he murmured. "It should not awaken this fast." Ethan felt stronger again, clearer. Like his senses had sharpened, he could hear distant whispers of movement inside the warship above, could feel tension in the air itself. Vaylor stepped back slowly, his expression turning serious. "Very well," he said calmly. "Let us see what kind of guardian humanity can produce." He lifted one hand slightly, and the warship above responded instantly. Its surface lights shifted from blue to deep red, weapons charging silently. Human soldiers below panicked, shouting orders that meant nothing against a ship that could erase cities. Alyra's voice trembled slightly, but she stood tall. "If you attack this world, the Council will know," she warned. Vaylor's answer was soft and chilling. "Only if there is a council left to hear it." The desert wind rose again, carrying sand in sharp spirals as the first energy cannons of the Imperial fleet aligned toward Earth's surface. And in that moment, Ethan understood something clearly. This was no longer about one princess. This was about whether humanity would be seen as weak dust, or something far more dangerous. The red glow from the Imperial warship spread across the desert like a second sunset, turning the sand into a field of blood-colored light. Human soldiers below shouted into silent radios, unaware that their weapons meant nothing against what hovered above them. Ethan stood still, the blue mark on his palm burning brighter with every second. It was no longer just warm, it pulsed with purpose. Alyra stepped closer to him, her silver armor faintly glowing in response to his rising energy. "Listen to me carefully," she said, her voice steady even as the sky threatened to fall. The bond between us is more than protection. It is resonance. Resonance with what? Ethan asked, his jaw tight as he stared at the massive ship above. With something your species has forgotten, she answered quietly. Above them, Lord Vaylor watched with narrowed eyes. He had expected fear. He had expected the human to beg or collapse under pressure. Instead, the Guardian stood his ground, and the resonance continued to grow stronger. Inside the warship, energy readings spiked rapidly. Officers exchanged worried looks. The human's biological structure is adapting. One of them reported, the resonance is rewriting neural pathways in real time. Vaylor's expression hardened. Impossible, he murmured, but the data floating before him did not lie. On the desert floor, Ethan suddenly felt a rush through his body. Not painful, but overwhelming. His senses sharpened beyond anything he had known. He could hear the faint hum of engines miles away. He could see small movements in the air like invisible currents flowing around him. Time itself felt slower, clearer. Aelira watched him closely. Long ago, she began, speaking quickly now, the first Celestine explorers crossed galaxies, searching for worlds with adaptive minds, worlds capable of rapid evolution under stress. They found many strong species, but none like yours. Ethan struggled to focus. What does that mean? It means, she said softly, humanity was never weak, only untested. Before he could respond, a streak of red light shot down from the warship, striking the canyon wall behind them and turning rock into molten glass. The shockwave knocked soldiers off their feet. Dust filled the air in thick clouds. Vaylor's voice echoed from above, amplified across the desert. Guardian, he called calmly, demonstrate your worth. Another blast followed, closer this time, forcing Ethan to move. He did not think. He reacted. He stepped forward and raised his glowing hand toward the sky. The blue mark flared intensely, expanding into a translucent shield that spread outward in a curved dome around him and Aelira. The next red blast struck the shield and dissolved into sparks of harmless light, scattering like broken stars across the sand. Gasps came from the human soldiers who witnessed it, though they did not understand what they were seeing. Ethan lowered his arms slowly, breathing hard, staring at his hand in disbelief. I don't know how I did that, he admitted. You did not learn it, Aelira replied gently. You remembered it. High above, Vaylor's calm mass cracked slightly. Increase power, he ordered coldly. 3 smaller strike vessels detached from the main warship and descended rapidly toward the canyon. Their engines burned silent and blue, landing in perfect formation around Ethan and Aelira. From each vessel stepped armored warriors, not assassins this time, but elite Imperial Guardians. They formed a circle, weapons raised, disciplined and precise. Aelira's voice lowered, urgent now. These are not here to kill me, she said. They are here to test you. The first Guardian lunged forward, moving faster than any human I could track, its blade of white energy cut toward Ethan's chest. But Ethan saw it clearly. He shifted aside with impossible speed, grabbing the alien's wrist and twisting with strength he did not know he had. The armored warrior crashed into the sand, stunned. Another attacked from behind, but Ethan turned before the strike landed, blocking it with his forearm. Blue light burst at the point of impact, spreading across his skin like veins of electricity. He pushed the Guardian back with a force that sent the armored figure sliding across the canyon floor. The remaining warriors hesitated, recalculating. Vaylor leaned forward inside his command chamber, eyes focused sharply now. The human was not only surviving, he was adapting with every strike. Every movement became smoother, more controlled. On the ground, Ethan felt something awaken deeper within him. Not rage, not fear, but determination. He was not fighting for a throne or a law written in stars. He was fighting because someone needed help, because something powerful had threatened his world. The last 2 Guardians attacked together, their movements synchronized, weapons flashing in arcs of white light. Ethan stepped into the attack instead of retreating, letting instinct guide him. He disarmed one with a sharp movement and used its own blade to block the second strike. Sparks of blue and white burst between them, lighting the desert like a storm. With a final surge, Ethan released energy from the mark on his palm. A wave of blue light spread outward in a controlled shockwave, knocking all remaining guardians to their knees without killing them. Silence fell again across the canyon, broken only by the soft hum of the warship above. Ethan stood in the center of the circle, breathing heavily but still standing. His skin glowed faintly, then slowly dimmed as the energy settled inside him. Alyra stepped beside him, her expression no longer uncertain, but filled with something new, pride. "He has proven resonance," she said firmly, her voice carrying upward toward the warship. Valor remained silent for several seconds, studying the human who now stood untouched among his finest warriors. Finally, his voice echoed down once more, calm but colder than before. "Interesting," he said softly, "very interesting." The red glow of the warship dimmed slightly, weapons powering down, but its massive shadow still covered the desert. "This changes the board," Valor murmured to his commanders. "If humanity can awaken so quickly, they are not a liability." One officer asked carefully, "Then what are they?" Valor's eyes narrowed as he stared at Ethan below. "They are a risk," he answered quietly, "and risks must either be controlled or eliminated." The shadow of the Imperial warship did not leave the desert. It grew wider, darker, stretching across cities far beyond the canyon. News channels around the world began showing strange images in the sky. A massive shape hovering where no aircraft should exist. Governments declared emergency alerts. Satellites failed one by one, and power grids flickered in confusion. Earth was not under attack yet, but it was under warning. Ethan stood beside Alyra, staring up at the silent monster above them. The earlier blast had stopped, but that made everything worse. The waiting felt heavier than the fighting. The mark on his palm had dimmed, but it still pulsed softly, like it was listening to something far beyond the sky. "They are calculating," Alyra said quietly, her eyes never leaving the warship. "My uncle is deciding if Earth is worth destroying." "That's not a decision he gets to make," Ethan replied, though his voice carried more hope than certainty. Across the planet, military leaders gathered in underground command rooms, staring at impossible readings on their screens, objects in orbit that moved without engines, signals that could not be translated, weapons that could not be matched. Panic spread slowly, but deeply. People looked up at the sky and felt something they had never felt before: helplessness. Inside the warship, Lord Valor stood before a wide viewing window that showed Earth in full, blue and fragile. He studied the planet not with hatred, but with cold strategy. "The Guardian is unstable," one of his advisors said carefully. "His power is increasing. If we delay, he may unite his species." Valor considered that, then nodded slightly. "Then we apply pressure," he answered calmly. Moments later, smaller ships detached from the main vessel and moved into precise positions across the globe, hovering above oceans and major cities. They did not fire. They simply activated a planetary suppression field. A low vibration rolled across Earth like distant thunder. Invisible waves disrupted communication systems and disabled advanced weapons. Humanity felt its strength fade without understanding why. Back in the desert, Ethan felt the change instantly. The air felt heavier, like gravity had shifted slightly. The mark on his palm reacted again, glowing brighter, as if resisting the pressure. Alyra touched his arm gently. "He is showing the world its weakness," she said. "He wants humanity to see how small it is." Ethan watched as one of the smaller ships projected a beam of light into the sky above New York City, forming a massive holographic symbol that could be seen for miles. It was the crest of the Celestine Empire, sharp and ancient. Then Valor's voice echoed across every device still functioning on the planet, translated instantly into every human language. "People of Earth," he began calmly, "you stand beneath the shadow of a greater civilization. Your world now holds something that belongs to the Empire. Surrender the bonded guardian and the princess, and your planet will remain intact." Shock spread across governments and homes alike. People did not understand the words, but they understood the threat. Ethan felt every eye of the planet turning toward him, even though most of them did not yet know his name. He looked at Alira. "If I go with them, they leave Earth alone," he said quietly. She shook her head firmly. "No," she answered. "If you surrender, he will take the bond. And without the bond, I lose protection. Earth becomes irrelevant. So either way," Ethan said softly, "he wins." "Unless," she replied carefully, "we change the narrative." Inside the warship, Vaylor watched global reactions unfold in real time. Panic, confusion, political division. Humanity was reacting exactly as expected, divided and uncertain. But then something unexpected happened. In the desert canyon, Ethan stepped forward in a clear view, standing tall beneath the hovering ships. He knew cameras were pointed at the sky, that satellites were still capturing fragments of what was happening. He raised his glowing hand slowly, letting the blue Mars shine brightly enough to be seen even from a distance. "I don't belong to you," he said firmly, knowing his voice would not reach space, but hoping his action would. Alira stepped beside him and activated her armor's communication core, amplifying his voice through the same channels Vaylor had used. Suddenly, Ethan's words echoed across the globe. "My name is Ethan Cole," he continued, steady now. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't choose a war, but this is my world, and I won't hand it over because someone stronger thinks they can take it." Across Earth, millions heard him, not as a soldier, not as a politician, but as a normal human standing under impossible odds. Inside the warship, Vaylor narrowed his eyes. "He learns quickly," he murmured. Alira then stepped forward and spoke clearly, her voice strong and royal. "By ancient law of the Celestine throne, I declare Ethan Cole as guardian consort. His world is now under my protection." Her words triggered something ancient within the Empire's legal systems. Signals flashed across Imperial networks. Ancient protocols activated automatically. Some of Vaylor's own commanders exchanged uneasy glances. "My lord," one officer said carefully, "if the princess invokes guardian consort status, Earth becomes a protected allied world under Imperial law." Vaylor's expression darkened slightly. "The Council would need to validate it," he replied coldly. "Only if the Council still holds authority," another officer added nervously. For the first time, cracks appeared within the Empire's unity. Some ships in orbit dimmed their red lights slightly, hesitant, uncertain about firing upon a legally protected world. Vaylor watched the hesitation spread like infection. His plan to intimidate Earth was turning into a political battlefield inside his own fleet. Below, Ethan felt the pressure shift. The vibration in the air weakened slightly as some of the suppression field generators powered down. Alira looked at him with a mixture of relief and admiration. "You did not fight with strength," she said softly. "You fought with presence." Ethan kept his eyes on the sky, because he knew this was not over. The fleet still hovered, massive and dangerous, and far beyond Vaylor's warship, in deeper space where no human eye could see, a faint unknown signal pulsed quietly. It was not Imperial, it was not human, and it had just noticed Earth standing under shadow. The sky above Earth remained heavy with silent ships, but something had changed. The red lights that once glowed with threat now flickered with uncertainty. Inside the Imperial warship, tension filled the command chamber like invisible smoke. Officers whispered in low voices, ancient laws scrolling across holographic screens. Princess Alira's declaration of guardian consort status had triggered protocols older than most of them. Protocols that even Lord Vaylor could not simply erase. Vaylor stood still, hands behind his back, staring at the image of Ethan projected before him. The human looked small compared to the fleet, dust still on his clothes, wind pulling at his jacket, yet he stood as if the shadow above him did not exist. "He is not trained," one commander said carefully. "He does not understand Imperial politics." "No," Vaylor replied quietly, "but he understands defiance." Below, in the desert canyon, Ethan felt the weight of billions of eyes. News drones circled at a distance, capturing every movement. Governments had stopped trying to hide the truth. There was no hiding a fleet in the sky. Alira stepped closer to him, her voice softer now, meant only for him. "My uncle will not retreat," she said. "He cannot. If he does, the council will question his strength. So he needs to win." Ethan answered. "Yes," she replied, "but he must win legally." Ethan looked at her, confused for a moment. She held his glowing hand gently. "There is one path left," she said, "an ancient right, older than fleets and politics, the right of ascendant claim." He frowned slightly. "That sounds dangerous." "It is," she admitted calmly. "A formal challenge between claimants to authority. If you challenge Valor as my bonded guardian, you must accept or lose legitimacy." Ethan stared up at the massive warship. "You want me to challenge the man commanding that?" "I want you to remind him that power is not only measured by ships," she said firmly. Inside the warship, alarms chimed softly as Alira transmitted a formal declaration across Imperial channels. Ancient symbols appeared across Valor's display, glowing gold instead of red. Valor's expression tightened as he read the message. "She invokes the right," he said quietly, almost impressed. One of his advisors stepped forward nervously. "My lord, if you refuse, your authority weakens. If you accept and lose, you forfeit claim." Valor's eyes darkened. "I do not lose," he answered simply. Moments later, a beam of brilliant white light descended once more into the canyon, forming a circular platform of energy above the sand. The fleet adjusted position, forming a massive ring in the sky, as if the entire planet had become an arena. Valor stepped down onto the platform. Alone this time, no guards, no visible weapons, his armor shimmered with contained power. Ethan felt the mark on his palm react instantly, glowing brighter than ever before, spreading faint lines of blue light across his arm and chest. He stepped forward without hesitation, though fear whispered quietly in the back of his mind. The world watched in silence. Valor studied him carefully. "You understand that this is not symbolic," he said calmly. "This is combat of claim. Authority is transferred through victory." Ethan nodded slowly. "You threaten my planet," he replied, his voice steady. "That makes this personal." A faint smile crossed Valor's face. "Good," he said. "Emotion strengthens resonance." The platform expanded, forming a dome of energy around them, separating them from the desert floor. The air inside felt charged, heavy with ancient power. Without warning, Valor moved, faster than any human eye could follow. He struck with precise force, aiming not to kill instantly, but to measure. Ethan barely reacted in time. Raising his glowing arm to block, blue and red energy collided with a sharp flash that lit the sky. The shockwave rippled across the dome, but did not break it. Ethan staggered back, feeling the strength behind the strike. Valor was not just powerful. He was experienced, controlled, each movement calculated. "You rely on instinct," Valor observed as he circled. "But instinct fades." "Maybe," Ethan answered, adjusting his stance, "but we adapt." Valor attacked again, this time unleashing a wave of red energy that bent the air itself. Ethan felt the mark pulse violently, and instead of blocking, he stepped into the attack, letting the energy strike him directly. For a moment, the world held its breath. But instead of falling, Ethan absorbed part of the blast. Blue light surged across his body, reshaping the attack, redirecting it upward where it shattered harmlessly against the dome. Valor's eyes widened slightly. "Absorption," he murmured. "Your species truly is anomalous." Ethan did not fully understand the science, but he understood survival. Each strike taught him something. Each movement sharpened his control. He was not matching Valor's centuries of training. He was shortening the distance between them with every second. The duel intensified, red and blue energy flashing in violent arcs across the enclosed sky. From below, humans watched what looked like two stars colliding above the desert. Inside the dome, Ethan felt exhaustion creeping into his muscles. But something deeper kept rising. Not pride, not anger, something simple and stubborn. He thought of his small garage, of quiet nights under open skies, of a world that did not know how close it was to destruction. Valor launched one final powerful strike, pouring concentrated energy into a single focused blow meant to end the duel. Ethan saw it coming. He raised his glowing hand and did something different. Instead of meeting force with force, he reached forward and grabbed Valor's armored wrist mid-strike. Blue light erupted violently between them, spreading outward in a shock wave that cracked the energy dome itself. For a long second, they stood locked in place, power surging through both of them. Then Valor's armor flickered, systems overloading under resonance feedback. Ethan pushed forward with everything he had left, not with hatred, but with refusal. The shock wave burst outward, shattering the dome completely and throwing both of them back onto the desert floor. Silence followed. Dust settled slowly around them. Valor lay on one knee, armor dimmed, breathing harder than before. Ethan stood unsteadily but upright, the blue mark on his palm blazing brighter than ever. Above them, the Imperial fleet dimmed its weapons automatically, responding to the ancient outcome encoded into its systems. Valor looked up at the human who had dared challenge him, and for the first time, there was no calculation in his eyes, only realization. The Empire had not underestimated a single man. It had underestimated an entire species. The desert was silent except for the wind moving across broken sand and cooling stone. The energy dome was gone, the sky above open again, but the fleet still hovered in a perfect ring around Earth like a frozen crown. Ethan stood unsteady yet upright, the blue mark on his palm glowing like a living star. Lord Valor remained on one knee, armor dim and flickering, the ancient rite complete. For several long seconds, no one moved, not the soldiers below, not the commanders above, not even Aelira, who watched with breath held tight in her chest. The outcome was already written into Imperial law. The bonded guardian had not fallen. The challenger still stood. Inside the warship, golden symbols replaced red across every command screen. Authority transfer protocols activated automatically. Ancient systems did not care for pride or ambition. They followed outcome. Valor slowly lifted his head. His expression was no longer cold strategy. It was something quieter, heavier. He understood what had happened. The Empire had witnessed a human stand against Imperial power and endure. "You carry more than strength," Valor said calmly, his voice no longer amplified but still heard clearly by those nearby. "You carry consequence." Ethan did not answer with anger. He simply stood his ground, breathing hard but steady. The glow around him softened but did not disappear. Aelira stepped forward slowly, her silver armor bright under the open sky. She looked at her uncle not with hatred, but with finality. "The right has spoken," she said firmly, "by law of ascendant claim. Your challenge is void. Your authority ends here." Across the fleet, ship by ship, red lights dimmed completely, blue and gold replaced them, signaling recognition of new rule. Imperial commanders bowed their heads inside their vessels. The Empire did not collapse. It shifted. Valor rose slowly to his feet, not in defiance, but in acceptance. "The Empire survives because it adapts," he said quietly, glancing once more at Ethan. Perhaps this was necessary. He turned toward the beam of light descending from the warship, preparing to return aboard, but paused briefly. "Guardian," he said without looking back, "if you fail her, the stars will not forgive you." Then he vanished into the light, leaving only wind and quiet behind. Above Earth, the massive warship adjusted position, no longer casting a threatening shadow, but holding steady at a respectful distance. Smaller ships moved into protective orbit rather than attack formation. The planetary suppression field deactivated completely, satellites reconnected, power grid stabilized, and across the world, people looked up at a sky no longer burning red. In the canyon, human soldiers lowered their weapons slowly, unsure whether to celebrate or fear what came next. Cameras captured the impossible moment, the first recorded duel between a human and a galactic ruler. Aelira turned to Ethan, her violet eyes shining with something deeper than relief. "It is done," she said softly. "The Empire recognizes Earth as a protected allied world under Celestine law." Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling exhaustion settle into his bones now that the adrenaline had faded. So no more threats, he asked quietly. No open ones, she answered honestly. There will always be forces in the galaxy that test strength. He gave a small, tired smile. Sounds like Earth will fit right in. Above them, a new transmission spread across the fleet and then outward into deep space. A formal coronation signal. Elira's status updated from princess in exile to empress ascendant. The throne was hers by right and by trial. A grand vessel descended briefly from orbit, not as a weapon, but as ceremony. A platform of soft light formed before Elira, displaying ancient symbols and crowns of energy. She stepped onto it gracefully, and for a moment, she looked less like the wounded girl Ethan had found in wreckage and more like a ruler born of stars. Yet when she stepped down, she walked not toward the warship, but back toward him. The Empire offers you position, she said gently, power beyond this planet, command among the stars. Ethan looked at the horizon, at the distant outline of his small garage beyond the ridge, at the simple life that had existed only days ago. I didn't fight for power, he replied quietly. I fought so my world stays my world. Elira studied him with quiet admiration. That is why the bond chose you, she said softly. The fleet began to ascend slowly, not leaving entirely, but repositioning into distant orbit, protective rather than dominating. Earth was no longer beneath shadow. It was beneath watch. As night fully returned to the desert, stars shining once more without obstruction, Ethan felt the blue mark on his palm settle into a calm, steady glow. Not blazing, not fading, simply present. Elira stood beside him under the open sky, her expression peaceful yet thoughtful. The galaxy has changed tonight, she said quietly. Humanity is no longer unknown. Ethan glanced upward, wondering how many eyes now studied Earth from distant systems, far beyond the edge of the solar system. In a region where Imperial sensors rarely scanned, the faint unknown signal pulsed again, stronger this time, reacting to the surge of energy from the right. It was ancient, older than the Celestine Empire, older than humanity. And it had just marked Earth as significant. Back in the desert, unaware of that distant watcher, Elira stepped slightly closer to Ethan, her voice almost a whisper carried by the wind. I offered you a throne, she said softly. He looked at her, confused for a moment. And you chose your world instead, she continued, her violet eyes warm now, no longer royal, no longer distant, just real. That is why, she paused gently, I chose you. Above them, the stars shimmered quietly, peaceful for now. But in the vast dark between galaxies, something vast had awakened, and it was already turning its gaze toward the small blue world that had dared to stand against an empire.